All right, so we've been learning about a different variety of program flow. So far we've done invocation and top-down. Next we want to talk about a program flow called selection. This allows me to choose or to select the logic that I would like to execute. I can decide whether or not I want logic to execute. There's a variety of different structures that are available for selection. 4 of them are mentioned here. We're going to begin with the if. So the if statement, the if structure, has a condition on it. It is a container, for lack of a better phrase, so it needs opening and closing curly braces. The if is lowercase, and inside the parentheses is a condition. And the condition is either going to evaluate to true or it's going to evaluate to false. And if the condition is true, it will execute all of the logic inside of the curly braces. So if we're going to evaluate a condition to either true or false, we're going to need some logic operators to help us do that. And here are an example of relational and logic operators. Some of them you're very familiar with, such as the less than or the greater than. Some of them you may not be so familiar with, such as the not equals to or is equal. And then the logic operators at the bottom, the not, the and the or, are going to allow us to create compound conditions. So I'm going to create a Java program with the basic layout. I'm going to call this class selection structures because we're going to be practicing with a selection structure called if. I'm going to be capturing information from the user, so I'm going to go ahead and import my scanner. So a basic if statement is a lowercase if with a parentheses. I'm going to put the condition in that in just a minute. And then it is a container, so it needs an opening and closing brace, so I'll put a comment on my closing brace. And inside here is some kind of a condition. And the condition is either going to evaluate to true or false. Let's say, for instance, we say 5 less than 7. Is that statement true or is that false? I'm going to build a print statement that will say something like, this is true. And if the statement or if the condition is true, it will execute the logic inside of the if container. If the condition is not true, it will not. So let me save this file, and then we'll compile it and run it. So when I run it, if the condition is true, it will execute the logic inside of there. If the condition is not true, it will not. How could I change that condition to be not true? Well, 5 is not greater than 7. If I compile it again to implement my changes and run it again, it is not going to execute the logic inside of there. So an if statement evaluates the condition. If the condition is true, it executes the logic in the bucket. Otherwise, it just skips the entire thing. So let's do another one. I am going to create a variable for a number. I'm going to prompt the user for a number between 1 and 100. And then I'm going to create an if statement based upon their response. So I need an integer variable. We'll call it number. I'll set it equal to a default value. And then I am going to prompt the user for that number. So I'm going to ask the user to enter a number from 1 to 100. And then I am going to read it in. But I probably need a scanner to do that. So let me create a scanner. So once I have created a scanner called response, I'm going to use that scanner to read it in. This number is an integer, so I'm going to use .nextInt to read that in. And then I'm going to build some print statements based upon the input. So I'm going to say if I have a condition. Once again, if is a container, so I need the opening and curly braces. So I'm going to say if, for instance, number is greater than 100. Well, I'm pretty sure that I asked them for a number between 1 and 100. If they give me a number that's larger than 1 to 100, I'm probably going to tell them your number is larger than 100. All right, let's run it and see what happens. I expect it to prompt me for a number. Please enter a number from 1 to 100. I notice my first if statement is not running because 5 is not greater than 7. If I put in a number that's greater than 100, such as 200, it will execute the if statement. It tells me that it's larger than 100. If I key in a number that is not larger than 100, such as 50, the condition is not true. Therefore, my if statement will not run. So let's do another one. This time I'm going to see if the number is less than 100. So if the number is less than 1, I'm going to build a container and put a comment on the closing curly brace. And now I'm going to say, if the number is less than 1, now what I would like to say to them is, sorry, that number is less than 1. It's too small. All right, so let's compile it and run it and see what happens. It's going to ask me for a number. Now if I key in a number that is less than 1, such as a minus 12, it's going to evaluate the first if statement. If number is greater than 100, well, I'm pretty sure negative 12 is not greater than 100, so it's going to skip that, and then it's going to go to the next if statement if the number is less than 1. I'm pretty sure that negative 12 is less than 1, so it's going to tell me, sorry, that number is less than 1, it's too small. Now I want you to notice that these are standalone if statements. Each one of them are evaluated independently. If I were to create another one to see if the number is less than 16, let's see what happens. So let's see if number is less than 16. If the number is less than 16, I'll probably say something like that number is less than 16. Now when I compile it and run it, let's see what happens if I put in, let's say the number negative 12. That's what I put in last time. I'm going to put in a negative 12, and now it is telling me that the number is less than 1 and that the number is also less than 16. That's because this is a standalone if statement. This is a separate standalone if statement, which means it's going to evaluate each one of my if statements marching down the line sequentially. So I've spent a lot of time telling them when they got it wrong, and now I want to tell them if they got it right. That means that they gave me a number that's between 1 and 100. So I'm going to build an if statement that can determine if they gave me a number between 1 and 100. So I'm pretty sure in order to be between 1 and 100, number is going to have to be greater than or equal to 1, and simultaneously number is going to have to be less than or equal to 100. This is called a compound condition, and we're using that Boolean operator, a logic operator that we showed, the not, the and, and the or. And is not a Java word, so instead we're going to have to use dual ampersands in place of the and. So now I have a compound condition. I'm going to put a print statement in here, and I'm going to tell them that they got it wrong. I'm going to say you enter. I'm going to tell them what they got, so I'm going to say you entered, and I will concatenate that with the number that they entered. And then I'm going to put another print statement in here that says something like that number is valid. I want to tell them when they got it right. I also wanted to put another print statement in here just so you don't think that the only thing I can put inside of an if statement or an if container is a single print statement. I can put all kinds of things inside of there. So let's run this and see what happens. If I put in a number between 1 and 100, such as 12, it is going to tell me, first of all, that my number is less than 16, and that is true. It executed that if statement, standalone if statement, immediately above, and then it's going to execute the next one that says my number is definitely between 1 and 100. It skipped over my first two if statements because my condition was not true. So what happens if I was trying to get them to guess a number between 1 and 100 and they got the one number right? There is another logic operator that I can use to do an exact comparison to see if two numbers are the same. It's called is equal. So now I'm going to say if number, and I'm going to use the is equal symbol. Let's say that the magic number they were trying to guess was 65. The is equal symbol is two equal sign. A single equal sign takes the value that it finds on the right hand side of the assignment operator and jams it into the variable it finds on the left. If I put two of them together, it becomes a comparison operator, and it is comparing the two values. So the is equal sign will do an exact comparison, and if the number that they entered is 65, I'm going to say something like, you win the grand prize. And I'll put a couple of exclamation points on it because it's a very exciting thing. So if I compile it and run it, and I guess the magic number, now it is going to tell me that I win the grand prize. It will also execute the if statement immediately above it because that is a valid. So far I've only been doing comparisons between a number and a literal value. So what if I create another variable? I'm going to create an integer variable called age. I'm going to set it equal to 23. Let's say that you're 23 years old. Now I'm going to say if your number is greater than or equal to age, which would be 23, I want to tell them the number is too high because now they're trying to guess your age. And so I don't have to do comparisons between a variable and a literal. I can do comparisons between multiple variables. There's one additional type of variable that I might want to do a comparison between, and that is a Boolean variable. The keyword is Boolean. I'm going to give it a name such as snowing. And I'm going to give it an initial value. I'm going to set it to false. Now, the word Boolean is a keyword, and the word false is a keyword. It's not surrounded by double quotes because it's not a string. It is a Boolean value, the other value being true or false. So, if I had set it to true, then the name of the Boolean either contains a true or false. And if I do an if statement on it, I might say something like, if snowing is equal to true, I compare it to, instead of the string true, I would compare it to the keyword true. And if it is snowing, I probably want to tell them to get out and shovel their driveway. Another way that I can do the same statement is to say if, and inside the condition, I'm just going to say snowing. And then I'm going to tell them to be careful when they're driving. The reason I can do this the shortcut way is because snowing is a Boolean variable, which means the value of that variable is either true or false. The if condition is looking for a true or false value. It doesn't care how it gets it. It only cares whether or not whatever inside of these parentheses is true or false. And the Boolean variable is by its nature true or false. So let's run it again and see if my shortcut works. The expectation is that it is snowing, so it should tell me to get out your shovel. And that is because I did a comparison between my Boolean variable and the keyword true. And the shortcut also ran, be careful with driving, because once again, the Boolean variable is true. Therefore, the entire if statement, or the if condition, evaluates to true. So another one of the logic operators that we learned about on our spreadsheet is the not operator. The not operator reverses logic. So what if I said, if it is not snowing, instead of saying is snowing is equal to the keyword false, a shortcut that I can do for that is just by saying not snowing. I use the keyword not to reverse the value of my variable snowing. Snowing contains the value true. If I put a not operator right here at the beginning of it, it changes that true to false. Now my if condition will evaluate to false. And if I tell them if it's not snowing, they should probably go out hiking, it will display this message only when that if condition is true. So let's run it and see what happens. And now it did not display it's not snowing, you should go hiking. Why didn't it display that? Well, because this snowing is true. When I put a not operator on the front of it, it became false. And my whole if condition now is evaluating to false. Therefore, it is not going to display this message. So how could I get it to display the message? If I change the value of snowing to false, now the value of snowing is false. And if I not that false, a not false is true. And now my entire if statement will become true. Because I changed the value of snowing to false, when I use the not operator in front of false, it switches a false to true, toggles it to true. Now my if condition is true, and therefore it will execute the logic inside of that if statement. One of the things that we have to be very careful about is what the not operator will do to my logic operators and or. So let's build an if statement that is using a compound condition, using the values of and or. So let's go back to my number. We had them key in a number between 1 and 100. So let's say that I wanted to reward them for picking the number 60 or the number 80. I'm going to build a print statement with that compound condition. All right, so I'm going to tell them that if they pick the number 60 or they pick the number 80, I'm going to tell them, well, if they've picked the number 60 or 80, that logic operator or is the dual pipes. You can find that pipe on your keyboard right next to your curly brace. So let's test it and see what happens. I'm going to choose a number that is 60, and then we'll try it again with a number 80 and see what happens. I see that it says I picked the number 60 or 80. If I try it again with a number 80, once again. What if I said I wanted them to not pick 60 or 80? What if I didn't want them to pick 60 or 80? Normally I would say if the number is not 60 or the number is not 80, you would think that that would reverse the logic, right? Just by changing the not, or just by changing the equal sign to a not. But now if I pick 60 it still says I picked 60. And if I run it again and I choose 80, it still says that I chose 60 or 80. That is because a not operator will reverse my logic operator. So instead of being the number is equal to 60 or 80, I can't just say the number is not equal to 60 or the number is not equal to 80. Because in theory, the number 60 is not equal to the number of 80, or is not equal to 80. And the OR operator only requires one of the two sides of the condition to be true. And while this one is not true, 60 is not equal to 80, therefore the entire condition becomes true, and it will tell me that they have picked a number between 60 or 80. And so in order to do this correctly, I would have to reverse my logic operator. And so now I say it's not 60 and it's not 80. And if I compile this one again and run it, and if I chose the number 60, it's not going to tell me that I've picked it. And if I chose the number 80, it's not going to tell me that I've picked it. So the point was the not operator has a tendency to reverse your logic operator. If it started as an and, when I apply a not to one of my conditions, one or both of my conditions, there's a very good chance that it would reverse it to an or. So if you're having squirrely results with your compound conditions when you apply an and or a not operator, I would just encourage you to swap your logic operator and see if that works.